You know what I find flattering? If I don't upload a video for about 2 days, people write in asking, "Are you okay?" I upload so regularly, so often, more than once a day. Just a couple days go by, I'm like, hey man, what's going on? You doing all right? I printed out a letter from a member of the audience. I can't remember the last time I did a video with anything written down on paper. And he asks, isn't it the case that these days society is becoming more and more sexualized and that human sexuality is being more and more commercialized? I made a video discussing this more than a year ago in response to Ashley Eliza, aka Turtleneck Sweater Girl, who has since, she was incredibly famous and incredibly successful. She made a lot of money. Now she's deleted her entire web presence, and she's even sent me emails asking me to delete my videos commenting on her, which I'm not going to do. Roll it.
And the thing is about hookup culture, it's not having a sex with like a lot of people. It's having sex without meaning, just like doing it with random people. Because nowadays people are actually having less sex. It's more just casual. It seems like today, with all the hookup apps, reliable contraceptives, and a general culture that just promotes casual sex, it's really just becoming the norm. It's almost like a weird thing if you choose not to engage in casual sex with people. It's like, who are you? You're some sort of prude, you're some sort of like weirdo. And then you have a bunch of other articles saying you have to figure out what you like. In order to figure out what you like in like having sex, you have to have sex with a lot of people. And I mean, my question to that is, why do you have to have sex with a lot of people in order to figure out what you like? Like, wouldn't it just be weird to barely know someone and then want to try some like insane thing you want to do? I don't know. TMI. No judgment, just my opinion.
What I mean to suggest to you in opening the video with that clip is that it is very, very easy to have this self-serving delusion that whatever social and political problems we're encountering are new to our own age, the particular epoch we happen to be living through, or getting worse during the epoch we happen to be living through. And you know, I'm not someone who recommends that people read books lightly. I don't waste people's time, and I take into consideration the position of the particular reader very carefully. This is a 27-year-old man who has a university degree in the sciences. He probably has not done the type of historical reading that would make him reluctant to make this sort of statement or raise this sort of question. Okay, you think we have a society that overly commercializes and commodifies sex today? How about the 1820s? How about the 1820s in the south of France? Like, I remember reading a lot of academic studies about the history of prostitution and sexual exploitation in Southeast Asia, because I used to do a lot of research related to Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, etc. And one of the most important things to point out was, oh, if you think this is bad, do you know what was going on in Marseille? The assumption that what was going on in East Asia, especially in relation to European colonialism, was this highly exotic, highly illicit, boundary-breaking, immoral trade in comparison to what was going on in Europe was really false. It's very easy to bring in this kind of unequal and unfair comparison. So in this case, he's saying, and I understand, 27 years old, this is the world he lives in, and this is the transformation he's lived through. Quote, sex is being widely used to promote products in commercials, on billboards, etc., in popular culture. Right. I remember going to the National Portrait Museum in England. Sorry, I forget. One of the big, major art galleries in England. It doesn't really matter which one I was in. And it was pointed out that there were a whole lot of paintings of young women selling flowers. And they ain't selling flowers. There was this convention in portrait painting of a young woman selling flowers, and this was a culturally acceptable way to depict prostitutes. There's a sense in which sex is commodified by beer commercials, but they're using sex to sell beer, right? They're not using beer to sell sex, which is what you're going to find in the 19th century, the 18th century, the 17th century, the 16th century, the 15th century, the 14th century, the 12th. If you read any historical literature from any prior epoch of history, right, you're going to start to realize the depth and breadth of the commodification of sex in different cultures at different periods of time. By the way, even including traditional Islamic cultures. I've done a lot of research on the history of slavery. Melissa's currently reading a book about the history of slavery in Muslim Central Asia, which I haven't looked at yet. I'd love to read it if and when I get time. And whenever you look into this, I mean, of course, it's also just partly the searing hypocrisy of the history of the Muslim world. But yes, prostitution, commodification of sex, even within traditional Muslim cultures, century by century, is shocking and appalling. The history of sexual exploitation in China, pre-modern traditional China. And, it's very easy to go from childhood to adulthood in any given decade, in any given century, and to have the impression, oh, this is something new. This is something that's gotten worse during my lifetime, just now. No. The problem is you went from the naive or jejune perspective of a child to the cynical perspective of a human being. This guy's 27. It's probably just in the last 10 years he really started learning about this stuff and perceiving it and realizing deeply how it vitiates society, how it ruins some young women's lives and some young men's lives, and the effects it has on us all. And he's not thinking, how is this really different from the 20th century, the 19th century, the 18th century, and how is it different from, again, history of Italy, south of France, history of Thailand, history of Japan. Talk about storied histories of prostitution, right? So what's really remarkable about our century, as is shown in that short clip I showed, we're living through a period of people having less and less real sex. And what's being commodified is simulation, right? So I sympathize. I mean, obviously, I don't think this is a stupid letter. I don't think he's asking bad questions. I don't think he has bad intentions. I don't think he's being raised for bad reasons. I just think you have to recontextualize the whole discourse about the commodification of sexuality and how it's being transformed by information technology, communication technology, so on and so forth. So he says, through popular culture, such as sitcoms, movies, music, including Nicki Minaj. Have you read Shakespeare? Dead serious. I'm stone cold serious. What do you think of the commodification of sex in that whole society, as indicated by, recorded by Shakespeare in his plays, in his sonnets, and the ubiquity of prostitution in that society? It's attested to throughout. This is not something new that just came out of nowhere. And again, by the way, there's also literature written from a female perspective, right? And there were, interestingly too, some feminist historians are interested in this, the history of women's advocacy for new laws restricting prostitution, right? Very often those reflect the woman's experience, that women really were concerned about their husbands going and sleeping with prostitutes, that part of the public demand for restrictive laws, which today most feminists regard negatively, part of it did come from women. Women really did struggle to control their husbands during long centuries when reckless behavior of this kind was common, and it is documented. And I think I can go so far as to say, I don't have to recommend any particular book. The autobiography of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon lost his virginity with a prostitute. He felt no shame in it. He wrote about it autobiographically, published this publicly, and he went on to advocate for prostitution being completely legalized, deregulated, and throughout the French Empire. He says, nowadays you can flick through Tinder profiles with the expectation that somewhere down the line you will get a match. Can you? So again, I've used Tinder. I've known you, right? I mean, what you get on Tinder is a glittering image, is a mirage, is an illusion, right? And those 19th century portraits of a girl selling flowers, you get the girl, not just the flower. That's what's being bought and sold, right? The history of the commodification of sexuality and just the reality of meeting people face to face. And believe me, I don't glorify any of this culture. In a beer hall, in a tavern, at an inn. Again, this is deep in every culture I know of, even the cultures where alcohol was illegal, like traditional Muslim culture. No, I mean, what you get on Tinder is nothing. you know. And I know people are drawn into it. He talks about the gamification of romance. I understand that there's that. It's like gambling, right? Why do people keep putting coins into a slot machine? Because there's a 1 in 1,000 chance or a 1 in a million chance they're going to get something out of it, right? But don't you realize how many gamblers will put in the coin and pull the lever and will never get anything at all? We can certainly ask that about Tinder and about this whole generation of dissimulated internet information technology based sexuality, right? So he then says, OnlyFans, the website OnlyFans, comes, like you said, selling intimacy. But it's not, right? It's selling a false promise of intimacy. It's selling dissimulated intimacy. It's selling you, you know, text messages from someone pretending to know you, pretending to care about you, pretending to be your girlfriend, not somebody actually being your girlfriend. I mean, so look, I'm very much engaged in the critique of video games, but I can't criticize video game violence as if it were real violence. I can ask people, why do you want to spend like 6 hours at a time watching a video simulation of shooting a person in the head again and again and again? Some of these games, you see someone get shot in the head every 60 seconds. You know, why do you want to do that? And I think there are things worth philosophizing about and worth reflecting on, right? But this is nothing like the question of, why did you decide to volunteer to fight in a war in Syria and actually see someone get shot in the head? Maybe you see someone get shot in the head every 6 months in real combat. You know, maybe not even that. There are guys who go into combat and spend the whole time carrying backpacks up and down the side of the hill. Again, read more books. You can read people's autobiographies of what war is like. For a lot of people, it's not that eventful. But my point is, I can't conflate these things. I can't question the morality of simulated violence as if it's the morality of real violence, and I can't question the morality of simulated sexuality as if it's real sexuality or real relationships or even real flirtation. As I already showed in that short clip, there are some statistics indicating that younger people, not really young people, but people who are younger than old, they're actually having less and less sex as the years go by. And in a sense, we all know why, right? We all know what it is young people do with their time now and what it is they're not doing. And probably some of us have a sigh of relief that people aren't living the same way they did in the 16th century, in the 17th century, in the 18th century. And maybe in some ways we're terrified that we've lost touch with some of that animal reality of what it is to be a human being, you know, in the 21st century. He says, quote, I hope I'm not suffering cognitive dissonance, but I'd like to think that as a rule of thumb, people are better off not objectifying themselves and not engaging in promiscuity or polygamy. But I constantly get overwhelmed from my more left-leaning friends with the answer, quote, what's wrong with it if it's not hurting anyone, close quote. All of this transpires or unfolds in the context of the kind of person you could be, what you might be doing with your time, who you might become, right? How would you feel if you had a 25-year-old male friend who had never lost his virginity and you told him to just give up and pay a prostitute and lose his virginity to a prostitute? How would you feel if you had an 18-year-old female friend who said she's sick and tired of working at McDonald's or at a pizza restaurant and you told her to give up and become a prostitute? What is it we're giving up on, right? Giving up on ourselves. We're giving up on our own potential to do something else with our lives, right? To lead some kind of meaningful life. It's very slippery. I don't have a simple 100% opposition to prostitution. I've mentioned this many, many times. I remember being on the border between Cambodia and Laos and meeting a guy who had his face caved in by a gunshot wound. And just realizing when I met this guy, that's not what we talked about. We did have a conversation in Cambodia, believe it or not. This guy had not had any reconstructive surgery. His face was just caved in by a bullet and he survived. He kept on living with it. He kept on coping with it. And I just realized, wow, you know, in this culture, no woman is ever going to touch this guy. No woman is ever going to sleep with this guy. He's going to have no love or romance in his life if it's not, you know, through prostitution. And that was a culture where prostitution was ubiquitous. Prostitution was everywhere. They had prostitution in small towns that didn't have any electricity or any running water. You know what I mean? You know, and I knew a lot of people involved in charity work related to people who were born disabled and also people who had become disabled through car accidents, sometimes through warfare, through stepping on a landmine. It's the glorified cause. Those people matter too, right? And look, maybe even within your own family. Maybe you've got a cousin or a brother or someone, maybe they're mentally disabled, maybe they're physically disabled. There are all kinds of people where I can't say to you that, their celibacy is worth something positive, or that they should live and die their whole lives as a virgin, let's even say, hypothetically, rather than, getting involved with prostitution, with, the sex trade, and that's just becoming clients. I can't make that claim because I don't believe in Christianity. I don't believe in some positive value to ignorance. I don't believe in some positive value, to maintaining your virginity, right? But when I have young women write to me, and sometimes I have middle-aged women write to me in response to my many, many videos talking about the OnlyFans phenomenon, and they ask the question, in effect, shouldn't there be a more meaningful life than this for a good-looking young woman who has the option, who has the opportunity to just cash in on her appearance on OnlyFans? What I say back is, couldn't you try? Maybe there isn't. Maybe there is really nothing more meaningful for life in this life for you than getting on OnlyFans and wearing a bikini and exploiting your body, exploiting your appearance. But I doubt it, right? Couldn't you try? And if you failed, right, like if you tried to have some kind of more meaningful life, whether that's through career, education, the arts, poetry, music, I don't know. If you tried to have some more meaningful life than just sexually exploiting yourself, and you failed, and it didn't work out, at least you have the satisfaction of that failure. And that very process of trying and failing would, I think, in a really meaningful way, change who you are, inform who you are. It would be part of becoming, the person you wanted to be. And that's one of the pieces of advice I could give to somebody on the other side of that, a young man who feels completely crestfallen, that he's never going to fall in love, that he's never going to have a romance, or he's never even going to lose his virginity, that he's on Tinder, swiping through this stuff. And, if some young man said to me that he feels like just giving up and sleeping with prostitutes, becoming part of the commercialized side of it, you know what? You could give up later, right? It's never going to be too late to give up, right? You could try. You could try to do something positive. You could try to have a more meaningful life. You could really earnestly try. And if you fail, right, at least you would have that development of your character. You'd have something that comes, from that failure, okay? So, look, there's a difference between living in a city where more and more people are being shot to death and living in a city where the proliferation of video camera technology means that more and more of the shootings are captured on film, shared on the internet, and discussed in the news. There's a difference between living through a period of time in which people are actually having more sex, or in which people are actually commodifying sex to a greater extent, and living through a period of time when the proliferation of internet technology, communication technology, the cheapness of cameras simply records it better, shares it better, makes us more aware of these options. Maybe we can practice.